And it's such a pleasure to introduce two wonderful friends. Let me start by saying that, we really live in surreal times these days. And one thing that it has done to all of us is that it's allowed us to kind of pause and reflect.
Yeah.
When we pause and reflect, I think art and culture are something that we realize are so precious to us, because this is a time when many of us have actually spent this time listening to music, listening to dance, theater, plays, movies, whatever you can do at this time, which you normally don't have time for in the real world. And this is a time when we say, wow, thank God for art and culture,
Mm.
because our lives would be empty without art and culture. And so today we are, it's a pleasure for me as a member of MAP, the Museum of Art and Photography, to introduce this wonderful session that we're doing with two very dear friends. My dearest friend Nandita, it's so lovely to see you. Although I'd love to give
Good
you
to see
a hug,
you, Kiran.
but it's virtual. Uh, and Nandita is someone who's a very special friend. She is, of course, such a celebrated actress. She's a writer, an activist, of course, a film producer, a director, so multifaceted, so talented. And I was just telling her that I just saw her very, very beautiful, poignant short film,
Yeah.
Listen to Her. And it was so touching. It really struck a chord in me, saying, this is what life is all about in our country and in the world. And, uh, we hardly know about it and we take things for granted. So, this is a time for us to listen to Nandita, and from her point of view and from her eyes and her, when she looks through the lens, how does she see the world? I think she's a wonderful person. She's so creative, so talented, that I'm
Oh,
looking forward to this session.
thank
And
you.
of course, I know
Thank
her
you.
father very well, who's such a celebrated artist. I can see the artwork on your walls.
That's true. Oh, yeah.
Yes, beautiful art.
Yeah.
And I want to also introduce another friend. Kaveri is another very celebrated journalist, an author. I've got to know her, in recent times. She's really great at making sure you bring focus onto these kind of issues. And I'm sure that Kaveri will really, really keep us engaged in the way she talks to Nandita. So let
We've
me.
done it a few times. I keep
Yes.
roping Kaveri in some of
Okay.
these sessions, so she knows me
Always a
well now.
pleasure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she's a pro. She's a pro. And so it's a pleasure for me to introduce both of you and look forward to what you're going to engage us in. So over to you, Kaveri.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Kiran.
you
It's
so much.
always such a pleasure to listen to you and to be inspired by you, especially in these times. We need many more people like you, Kiran. I've always told you that. Thank you so much. Welcome, Nandita. It's such a pleasure to have you with us. And I want to start with the film that you've just made on domestic violence. I want to get into that right away because it's something that
Yeah.
you did during the lockdown and it mustn't have been easy. And
No.
really, the female gaze, when one talks about, it's just the attention to detail. I don't want to generalize, but that the sound of the whistle of the pressure cooker, the hot water for the coffee, the you telling your son about his waveboarding. There's such a that domesticity. There's so much authenticity to it, and I think that's what is so wonderful about not just the female gaze in general, but your gaze in particular.
Thank you.
How was that? How was it to shoot that during this time? It mustn't have been easy.
It was far from being easy. It was actually more difficult than I had imagined. I
Yeah.
was being very impulsive. I'm generally very impulsive. But in a creative process, you can't be impulsive because there's a
Yeah.
whole long process, and usually you write, you share it with a few people, you make many drafts, and it's difficult to be spontaneous in a film. It's not
Hmm.
a poem or a painting where you
Yeah.
just sort of put it down on the paper. So, but I actually wanted to just see what it is to just be also spontaneous through your film.
Hmm.
And I was just very moved by all these stories that I had been hearing and was just very disturbed.
Hmm.
And then I read this New York Times article about how the women are finding it difficult to just focus on their Zoom calls
Right.
because they're constantly being interrupted. And
Yeah.
that's my life, you know.
Yeah.
And I felt
Exactly.
like I'm so privileged. I've got help. I can't even complain. I'm cooking and cleaning and
Yeah.
I don't have a husband in the bedroom also to ask me for coffee. Like, I really shouldn't be complaining
Or to get the door.
or to get the door. So, in many ways, and yet I'm juggling constantly. My
Yeah.
child is asking me 10 questions during the day, which I want to answer.
Yeah.
I'm constantly, as most women, feel guilty. When
Yeah.
I'm doing my work, I'm guilty. I'm not spending time with
Yeah.
him. When I'm with him, I'm feeling guilty. I'm not doing my work well. So I kind of could relate to it. And also, I was hearing from my friends how the domestic violence has increased, reading
Yeah.
about it, not just in India, but around the world.
Right.
So it was sort of a mishmash of all these emotions. So I just wrote a 7 page script, and without sharing it with anybody, I just next day decided, okay, I'm going to shoot. So I only have 2 members in my team, and they were on Zoom, and I didn't have all these voices that you hear as an audience. There was no voice of a husband or the pressure cooker or the bell or the cop or the woman. I had to imagine all these
Right.
voices, and I didn't have the time to even learn up my lines. So I was kind of winging it as I went.
Yeah.
And I realized I didn't even have a stand for the phone. So I was like, okay, where do I even place my phone? I would place it on all the books that I've been wanting to read, which are on the top pile. I placed it on that, got my cook to say, okay, अब मैं on करूँगी तो on करना. Then his hand would shake. As he would get involved in the scene, he would start leaning and I would say, go back. You know, we had all of that.
Yeah.
And then I realized the camera was too far, so it can't pick up the sound. So I took an
Right.
old phone. So I would start the sound and I would say everything sound. I would myself press it. Then I would say camera. Then he would press it. Then I would say shot one, take two. And by then, of course, giving after all the instructions to my son and everything, I would forget what I really had to say and I would just do it. So it was quite a mad sort of shoot where I'm imagining, talking, looking back. Oh, now the bell is ringing. Now this mango is happening.
Yeah.
So it was a bit of a mono acting, as they say. But I think when you're driven by a certain deeper intent, everything just sort of also just flows. And, I think if we just stop fearing failure too much and worrying about how is it going to come out, how are people going to judge it, like you said, I think authenticity, even on a flat screen, kind of comes through. When I
Absolutely.
hear people, when they mean what they're
Yeah.
saying, it moves us, and
Yeah.
that's just the way it is. And then, of course, in the post production, I got a lot of help from a really good editor who did Firak and Manto, an eminent editor, Shikha Prasad, and then two people I wanted to work with for sound and music, Kunal Sharma and Sagar Desai. I got them on board. Everybody said yes instantly.
And
And
Ali Fazal's voice,
Ali Fazal's voice, he's the husband whom most
husband.
women don't like because obviously he's ordering around too much.
Yeah.
He used to be a good guy. I
Yeah.
haven't made him a villain. He's like,
Yeah.
yeah, black coffee bana do yaar.
Exactly. Yeah.
That kind of
Yeah.
work. But doesn't hesitate to order around, doesn't care about watching his film on full volume, all of that. Swanand Kirkire was the cop, and Amrita Subhash and Sandesh Kulkarni, because they are couple in real life as well. They, I thought, would make for a nice couple who are, beating and
Yeah.
crying and all that would overlap. So that was part of the creative process. But after I shot it, I felt it would be nice to have someone who would really support it and spread it wider. And for a change, I don't have to ask everyone to just do it for free, but I could pay them little token amounts if I got some money. And I called up the UNESCO head of India,
Hmm.
Eric Ford, and he said, yes, we'll support it. And he
Wow.
got on board UNFPA, UN Women, UNICEF, then the South Asia Foundation, Madanjeet Singh Foundation, all these foundations kind of came together. And I felt like, yes, more the merrier. And
Yeah.
I have taken no copyright. I have not said you have to seek permission to either screen it or to show it or to, if you want to dub it, do what you want. I mean, I think we just need more open source stuff,
Yeah.
especially if it's about something where you are trying to spread the word, you're trying to break the silence around these issues. So, yeah, I just put it up. And, when I was reading all the comments, I seldom read comments. I never read
Yeah.
what people write, the praise, criticism. It's like you've done your work. It is
And
what it is.
let it out
I
there.
was reading, and I was reading because I was just so touched by the kind of stories that women were sharing, and I thought, my God, they were talking about how their parents have not saved them from abuse. There was so much of cynicism and sadness in some, even in the praise and all of that for the film. There was a sadness that was so palpable, and I felt, if nothing else, we need that space to even express that. So yeah, and thank you, all of you, for also having this conversation. And just all these things just need to come out in the public domain. These
Absolutely. And
stories from the homes and
yeah,
hidden behind four walls is not a private matter. And
yeah.
I think that's what we need to say, that this is not. If somebody is abusing in your house, it is a public matter. It is a human rights issue. And there's absolutely no shame in saying that.
But Nandita, of course, as you know, we don't have institutions which necessarily prevent this. And I think that is why the film has struck such a chord with people, because
Yeah.
at the end of the day, even you, who's playing a privileged woman, has to go into the bathroom,
Yeah.
into the washroom, to have a private conversation, in a house which, you possibly own. So the
You
sense of,
affluent.
yeah, so the sense of lack of privacy, the sense of, your own space, women don't have that, and
And it's been written. I mean, it's been
yes,
written that bathroom really is the private space that sometimes
exactly,
women, when they complain. It
yeah,
was written in the article also that I read, that they actually go to the bathroom. I mean, it's tragic
yeah,
that you call your home,
yeah,
and we are talking about stay home, stay safe.
yeah,
But the fact that home is not safe for so
no,
many women,
exactly.
the irony totally shouldn't be lost on us.
Yeah, you have to retreat, and you can't even retreat into the kitchen because usually kitchens don't have locks, and
No.
you have to retreat into the
Yeah.
water. So I think that's why it really worked so well. Does that make you think that you should not take so long between films, Nandita, which has been my biggest complaint with you?
Well, I know I do take. I mean, Iraq was 10 years ago. To make Manto, it took me another 10 years. Well, now it's not going to take that long because
Yay!
I'm kind of itching to tell stories. I think for me, art has always been a means to an end.
Yeah,
So I've not really been driven by, oh, I want to be a director, or I want to, what about this story? I've
right.
never looked for stories. I mean, including this, things have just very instinctively come to me, or I've just almost felt compelled to tell it, and I've just told it.
Right.
But now I think there are lots of things. There is enough things that can bother us. There's no
Yeah,
dearth of that,
for
unfortunately.
sure. Yeah,
Like for instance, I was so troubled by the images that we were seeing of migrant workers, like all
yeah,
of us must have, right? And it was
yeah,
so frustrating not to be able to not only do anything but to live life as if it's business as usual. I mean, I know
exactly.
we are all under lockdown, but I have this great view of the sea,
Yeah,
the air is cleaner, there is no one honking. I anyway work from home, so not much has changed for me.
yeah. And your
So that
child is with you.
dichotomy, well, that has changed because earlier when I was in school, I had some focused work time. That is not happening. But largely, we
Yeah,
are just, I mean, it's not a life and death thing. I'm not
yeah.
caught between the virus and starvation. So I think that dichotomy is kind of difficult to live with. So you also respond because you want to be alive. You want to give some meaning to your own life and to
Ah,
your privileges.
right. And I think one of the things that struck me, Nandita, which we were discussing the other day, that the migrant in Indian cinema usually is portrayed usually as North Indian, male, but this migrant crisis, I don't even want to call them migrants. They're they're us. We are them,
Yeah.
and they are us. But this has taught us that actually more than half are women, and they work on our buildings, they work in our buildings, and really they've been invisible to us all this time. What were we doing?
Yeah, I mean, I think we never even thought of this category of people as
Yeah,
migrant workers.
exactly,
This pandemic has brought in so many things that existed before. It has
yeah,
only sort of accentuated it, or it has sort of shed some light on it. Suddenly we realize that most people actually came from other places. I mean, we are all migrants. Am I not a migrant from Delhi? I mean,
Yeah,
who really
exactly.
belongs? How can we be purists? We all are from somewhere, and so. But the thing is that in case of migrant workers, we thought also only construction workers. We
Yeah,
didn't think our own house help,
exactly.
the street hawkers, like literally everyone. I remember there was this image of the Bandra station.
Yeah,
And, there were so many people just because there was some rumor that there was going to be some train that day.
change which never
And when you
happened.
think of Bandra, which is an affluent, sort of very happening, 50 most happening neighborhoods in the world, it actually made it to that list in Condé Nast. And then when you see these images, and I was hearing some chatter in some of the chats, like, oh my God, all these people were in Bandra? Like, yes, for every household that is affluent and that is
Yeah,
happening, there are people who are working.
sustaining
And
that. Yeah,
even when I did Manto, I remember in one of the speeches they said, like, who do you want to thank that you've been able to do this film? I said, my house help, my
yeah,
nanny who takes
yeah,
care of the child so that I can work.
right.
So I think this is a huge issue, and you rightly said that we always think of a male migrant in
Yeah,
our popular imagination.
yeah,
First of all, migrant stories are decreasing.
yeah,
And even in films, if you see, I mean, the
absolutely.
one of the best ones was probably Do Bigha Zameen
Yeah,
by Raj Sahani, of a rickshaw puller, a man
yeah.
who comes from his village
Goes
and
to
how he makes it.
Calcutta. Yeah, yeah,
But today's protagonist is not even the common man. He's
yeah,
not even the common man, let alone the common woman.
yeah,
Woman to aur piche,
exactly.
So the people who actually make a city, the people who build our homes, the people who work so that we can work, are completely hidden in plain sight. They are invisible.
Hmm.
And the pandemic has taught us that they are right there. They are making our lives, our lives are so deeply intertwined.
Right.
And it has also taught us that I cannot be safe alone.
Yeah,
I'm not on an island.
right.
If I want to be safe and if I want to be healthy, I need to care about others too.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much we will come out of it learning and wiser, or will we go back to our old ways? But to answer your question, that yes, in fact, the studies show that more than half are women migrant
Yeah.
workers. And like everywhere else, they are invisible. They are carrying these little children. They are carrying their luggage. You all
Ah,
must have seen the
and
cycle
that
girl.
no,
She
and
was,
that picture of that a woman carrying her duck as well as her dog. I mean,
yeah,
yeah, that's
where all animal
heartbreaking.
lovers were being told that, listen,
Yeah,
when you move out, yeah, and there are umpteen number of you. That cycle girl, also the
exactly.
12-year-old girl who carried her father, and there are umpteen.
What a
But
story.
what a story! I mean, and without any drama to it.
Yeah,
If one of us had done it, we would be like sweating and saying we would have been such great martyrs, and
yeah,
we would have built a whole story around it. She just did it. It was the most natural thing for her to do. And
absolutely.
but the way we don't even value life. I
Yeah,
mean, people are actually dying in villages as well, where there are no beds, where there is no
yeah,
health situation is so bad.
yeah,
Kiran would shed so much
yeah,
light on it to know the struggles in a country where, I don't know, what is it, Kiran? 1.3% is what we spend on our health, of our
yeah,
health, I mean,
yeah,
on
Yeah,
health
yeah,
budget.
it is just about 1%, and we should be spending at least 2.5.
right.
What are our priorities? I
Yeah,
mean, if we don't care about the health of our people, and you can imagine in the ladder of things with
yeah,
women coming anyway in the lower rung of the
right,
ladder, what is, a woman's health? Is that a priority at all? It's never been.
right.
In a country where sex ratio is falling, where
Yeah.
female feticide and infanticide and domestic violence and dowry death is
And women in the workforce, that
women
that
in
has
the
declined.
workforce, widows,
Yeah,
I mean, it's literally from cradle to grave, it's incessant. And people, like, sometimes I remember I was talking to someone and they said, oh God, it's kind of boring. We know all this. So how do we make something like this exciting? I mean, I just find it appalling when someone says
yeah,
that we've heard so much of it. Like, how do you make this exciting? So I'm sorry, I'm getting agitated, but it's just that if we are not going to learn from this surge that has happened, coming
yeah,
back to
yeah,
domestic violence and the overburdening, which is a
yeah.
subtle form of abuse,
Yes,
where every woman is almost feeling fatigued.
Yes.
I mean, across class. And,
Yeah.
I also talk to, I'm sure you talk to many
Yeah.
women, and they're just juggling, and much of it, they just think that's the way it is. They are
Yeah.
meant to do this.
Because it's
If
the
the man does
conditioning.
a little, they are
Yeah.
grateful,
Yeah.
you know, kind of feeling like, no, at least he does put the trash out, and
Yeah.
he's doing the clothes in the washing machine. And this is talking of the sort of upper class or
People
the
who
upper
have
middle
a
class.
washing machine. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's across
Yeah.
the board where women have also internalized.
Yeah.
We are as much part of that process of internalization of that patriarchy,
Yeah.
where we think, but this is my responsibility. When
Right.
53% women think it's okay to be beaten up,
Yeah.
this was actually some study done
Yeah.
recently, a few years ago, where they said it's okay. A man has to hit.
Mhm.
I mean, that's when he's a man, but that it's not the end of it. He still loves me.
Yeah.
What kind of conversation is that? And you can't
Absolutely.
blame them because they have deeply internalized this whole idea of what masculinity is and what femininity is.
Right.
So we have a huge battle against us. So many short films, webinars, conversations, all of that, I think, is a drop in the ocean, but I always
But
believe
it
that
has
every
to
drop
be done.
counts.
Absolutely.
Every drop counts.
Absolutely.
Everything gives us half a step closer to where
Yeah.
we want to go. And we want
Absolutely.
to hasten the process. We don't want to go too slow either,
Yeah.
because as we speak, many lives are getting destroyed.
And we've talked about this before. We have to have anger in us, Nandita. Anger that these things are happening and these
But
things
remember
continue.
what I said to that
Yes.
in our last conversation?
Yes.
With so much violence around, I'm not feeling good about just being angry. I don't
Yeah.
think that's the solution, because anger is the root of that larger violence.
Right.
So how do we make it constructive?
Constructive.
How
Yeah.
do we change it to compassion? And I know it may sound too spiritual, and I haven't even reached close to it. I do get agitated from time to time, but I'm consciously working on it, because that is when people start justifying. Even those men who are beating up, they justify. I got angry, I got
Yeah.
frustrated, he
Yeah.
didn't do this. And the minute you justify anger and justify violence, you are giving it that space, and you're saying
Right.
it's okay in these
Right.
circumstances. Of course, I mean, if you have to do it as self defense, or
Yeah.
you have no choice, you have to retaliate, absolutely. But otherwise, I think the time is to invoke that empathy. Our schools must teach us empathy and compassion and all of that, as much as they teach us science and whatever,
Absolutely.
English language and
Nandita,
geography.
your direction has always been empathetic, and I've always noticed, even in Manto, for instance, Manto's wife is almost as powerfully shown as Manto is in Firak. I think Deepthi Naval's character is quite remarkable because she's observing all this that her horrendous husband is doing, but she's rebelling in her own quiet way, and even Shahana's character, uh, so I think the ability that you have of looking at these women, of course the men as well, but especially these women who may not have many lines sometimes, but as very strong and powerful characters. Talk a little about that.
So I think, first of all, this it's a misnomer to think that just because a film is women centric, it's a
Yes,
feminist film.
right.
I don't want to name them, but there have been some films that have been called feminist that I find very offensive,
Yeah,
because the gaze with which they are looked at, or the kind of blandness with which, in the sense, they are not really layered, they are not really
yeah,
reflective of our strengths and vulnerabilities. We don't have to be one Durga and killing the villain. I get those scripts all the time where, oh, this is a very feminist film, you kill the villain at the end. So, first of all, this is not a fight about men versus women.
right,
We want the men on our side. We
right,
want the men to also understand you do not have to play those roles of being the powerful, and the sense of entitlement that you have, that please question it. It's better to have a friend at home or a companion
yeah,
than to be dominating. Of course, that's a long drawn battle, because even the feminist movement hasn't worked enough with
right,
men. So my point is that in films, if we can show women characters layered,
yeah,
and can create that empathy through them. So even in Manto, like you said, sometimes the empathy is more for the wife, for
exactly.
Safia, then it's for
Yeah,
Manto. And that's
yeah,
fine.
yeah,
And I don't, and just because I truly admire and love Manto, it doesn't mean that everything has to be right about him.
right,
You know, so I think it's also about creating empathy through your characters.
right.
And sometimes I'm accused that why did you not do a film about a woman protagonist?
Say
Why Manto,
Ismat. Yeah.
right? Firstly, he was a
Why
person,
not on Ismat, for instance? You
why
were
not
asked
on
that.
it?
Yeah,
Yeah, constantly ask that
yeah,
question. You know, but the thing is that the men have also controlled the narrative,
yeah,
both of men and women.
yeah,
So when we have a female gaze, it's not only about women. How do we want to portray men and women and
yes,
situations and incidents? It is a very instinctive gaze. When I'm directing, I'm not thinking that, oh, I'm a woman and therefore I have
yeah,
to be like this.
exactly.
Just a director, I'm just doing what I would do.
Right.
But my life experiences that have been informed by my being a woman, just as it's been informed by my being half Odia, half Gujarati, living in Delhi, you know, all the other experiences that I've had, my gender is one of those many experiences. The reason I feel my being a woman takes kind of precedence over other identities is because I'm never allowed to forget it.
Forget it.
I'm constantly having to kind of, in good or bad ways, I'm constantly having to, you know, sort of talk about it or I'm constantly reminded. I'm never really seen as a person. Are we? I mean, the women on the panel,
Yeah,
the way a man is, it's like if somebody drives badly and you say, oh God, that driver, you saw that? If a woman drives badly,
yeah,
you immediately say it's a woman driver.
right,
She's also just a driver. We don't say that male driver did
right.
that. So that, I think it's really time for us to shift that gaze, to be able to see ourselves as people and
Yeah,
to respond to things like that. So I think the whole question of female gaze and therefore the kind of characters you build in is about creating those empathies that automatically happens. I mean, I've been on sets even as an actor where there are more women.
hmm,
It's just a warmer, more empathetic setting.
hmm.
It's not because all women are nice and all men are bad,
Yeah.
but there is a different kind of, I think women find it easier to express themselves. You know, we're more demonstrative sometimes. It's
And I
just a
think
different
we're better
action.
team players for sure.
Yeah, because we ourselves have somehow come to the top of whatever that space
Yeah,
is, you know, whatever that top is for that
yeah,
matter, but it's been a struggle.
yeah,
And therefore, we like to take everyone together.
right.
And at times, it's also our vulnerabilities. Like, I think aloud a lot, and
Yeah,
sometimes it was seen as a weakness, even
right.
when I was with Manto or Firak, or, you know, you're helming a project, and yet you're like, I don't know if I should do this or that. What do you think I should? So I listen to everyone, but
Right,
I would still do what works for me.
right.
But just the fact you're asking
Yeah,
questions was seen as a sign of weakness, or you're too
right.
vulnerable, or you don't know, or you're not confident.
Yeah,
You know, it's immediately all of those things that are thrusted on you. And these are again subtler forms of sexism
yes.
that we feel all the time. If we articulate, we'll be called, oh, you feminist, now don't start again.
Yeah,
Right? Like
yeah,
all the time, your radars are higher than they need to be. But we are, over the years, our radars do become good
yeah.
and we catch those subtle forms of sexism. And the subtler the abuse or the subtler the sexism is, the more difficult it is to counter because you
Absolutely.
can't even call it out.
Yeah, you have
Yeah,
to,
it's a complex situation.
and that is still Nandita in the realm of art, in the realm of commerce. When you go out there as a woman filmmaker, it's even tougher, isn't it?
Yeah,
Although,
because it's
yeah,
dominated completely by men, and
exactly.
you know, and women want to often tell different stories. Not always.
Yeah,
There are some very commercial and big budget, and you know, like just like it could be made by a man or woman,
yeah,
whatever. Every time we don't also have to wear that flag. You know, some of
right.
the best films that we've seen about women actually have been made by men because
Yeah,
for the longest time they were just more men. So
yeah,
just sheer numbers,
yeah,
you know, it's Satyajit Ray, Shyam Benegal, you know, this Adur Gopalakrishnan, Rituparno Ghosh, Mrinal Sen. These were the films that really portrayed women characters very
absolutely.
beautifully, and that's
Yeah,
what we grew up seeing.
right.
But it doesn't mean that we do not want that kind of a variety. But the minute it's a woman on the other side, I think it's also in the way they talk, the
Hmm.
kind of words they use.
Yeah,
It's in those subtler ways. They just feel that you might get too emotional. You might not see the commercial
The
aspects of it
big
now,
picture.
the big picture. Exactly, you
Yeah.
might get too carried away, and
Yeah.
then you have all these other issues of child and getting periods and this and that, so you're a bit of a liability basically.
Yes.
So, and the world doesn't make it easier for
Yeah. Yeah.
women, especially who have children, to be
Yeah.
able to do things.
Right.
And that's why the minute most women have a child, they kind of just give up on work.
Right.
It's something that they park themselves, and then they are too late because everything has moved ahead and things have become obsolete. So
Right.
you're out of that race, so to say.
Yeah.
And if you are juggling, like myself,
Yeah.
I find it difficult because in
Yeah.
most places there aren't, that support system just doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Like when people invite me for, let's say, events or something, and if I say, oh, but I'd like to get my son, but if I get my son, I have to also get a nanny because when I'm working,
Yeah.
who's
What
going to
does
be
he do?
taking care
Yeah.
of him? And those are difficult things. So even small things like that, I think the society is not geared to just seeing women work in the same way as they see men working.
Nandita, at the same time, we've had a spate of these commercial mainstream movies, which somehow have, when we've been told that they're women oriented, women centric. They tend to be more biopics, and they tend to be, taking off from what you said, somewhat flatter. You know, uh, is that a trend? That you support? At least more stories are being told about women, or is it something that worries you because you know it's in a way quite limited?
Well, I mean, if you take in terms of percentage, it's still very little. It
Yeah.
might have moved from 1 to 3 or something,
Right.
but it's still very little. So, but that's true of big star versus non-star
Right.
actors.
Right.
That's true of urban films versus rural films,
Right.
but that's that kind of a setup. So, in everything where it is less mainstream,
Yeah.
it is going to be difficult. When I was a chairperson of Children's Film Society,
Yeah.
and I was looking at various films, and everything that gets a U certificate is supposed to be for a 6-year-old child to a 60-year-old person.
Right.
And a 60-year-old person can still see a childish thing, but for a 6-year-old to see something that's for grown-ups may be
Yeah.
completely inappropriate,
Yes.
and yet we don't have that.
Right.
When I do a film about one thing, I also get a barrage of messages and emails saying, when are you going to do a film about disability? When are you going to do a film about water crisis? When are you going to do a film about some this issue and that, and child labor? And
Yeah.
in our country there's no dearth of issues, and it
Absolutely.
kind of breaks your heart
Yeah.
because it is overwhelming and you cannot compete with issues. Every issue is important.
Yeah.
And how do you even do that? I mean, look at the craft and art communities. So many crafts people are just in their villages stuck. They don't have the material, they cannot sell it, they are dependent on that.
Right.
And are we any less artists than the modern art or a filmmaker or
Exactly.
a classical singer or a pop singer? But it's complete. So there are so many people below the radar. There's so many people who have we have kind of pushed to the margins. That there are more people on the margins, and there are very few people really in the center who are kind of the decision makers, who are controlling the trade, whether it's in cinema or anything else. So how do we, in through our work, keep bringing those voices forward? I think that's what we can do. I mean, I try to just do what I can do, and that's why I don't watch anything. I don't have a television at home. I barely watch
You're not
the news.
missing much.
I'm not missing. For 4 years, I've not had, and it's great because I don't miss it. My child doesn't miss it. Also, when you don't have something, you don't miss it anyway.
Yeah.
So, because it's otherwise you just get overwhelmed by the problems and you feel, what's the point of me doing anything?
Right.
Whereas you want to keep your sanity, you want to be enough informed so that you don't become numb, or you don't forget the realities that are beyond your reality. But otherwise, I think we just have to be at it till our last breath. That's the only way we can kind of justify our lives.
Nandita, does it amaze you sometimes that even a film that you did quite a few years ago now, Fire, is still possibly one of the few films where a woman gets to love another woman on screen without
authentic
inhibition.
way.
Yeah. So does that, worry you? We've not really progressed much, have we? We've sort of regressed in a way.
In any field, I mean,
Yeah.
definitely in the, but I want to believe that fire had its contribution in the whole LGBTQ
Yes,
discourse
for sure.
because, it was a landmark film for the time it came, like, what, 24 years ago.
24 years ago now.
Yeah,
Yeah. Can
1996
you
I shot
imagine?
it.
It's so long ago.
Absolutely. And I remember when it was 20 years for the 20th year anniversary, Shabana, Deepa, and I were on a panel.
Yeah.
And for Women of the World or Women in the World,
I
history.
think it was William Dalrymple who was the moderator.
Was it
Or
for
was it
that
Tina
council?
or
Yeah,
Tina
I think it
Brown?
was Tina.
Right.
And it was just, we were talking about it and we realized that at least till then, no film had really come about this issue.
Yeah.
And yet it somewhere moved the needle because people were forced to talk about it. Like Kiran started talking about, like in her introduction, Kiran, when you said that art is so important,
Yeah.
it's why we know that we are alive, and it's not just an elitist thing. If
Mm.
art was just elitist, then the folk artists wouldn't be decorating their bowls or
Absolutely.
weaving in a particular way, or making their dhokra, which is an elaborate process. It's actually very, very primal. And I think that's why it is impactful, and especially cinema in a country which is largely, that's the primary source of
Yeah.
entertainment. Films can go into our subconscious without us even realizing it, and that's why they can be very dangerous, because
Yes.
they can also be propagating very regressive ideas,
Yeah.
or they can spark new ideas, they can challenge prejudices, they can give us food for thought, they can make us uncomfortable, they can ask inconvenient questions, they can do things. And that's why the orthodox and the conservatives are always scared, and that's why they want to ban a film.
Exactly.
Because
Right.
if a film couldn't do anything, they wouldn't, right? I mean,
They
it
wouldn't.
happened to
Yeah.
me in fire. Then for water, I shaved my
Yeah.
head, and so did Shabana, and we couldn't shoot
You
it. They
couldn't
had to,
shoot it. Yeah.
they shoot it 4 years later with a different cast to be
Yeah.
able to make it.
And not
So
even in India. They had to shoot it in Sri Lanka because they
in
were
Sri
so
Lanka
scared.
with another name, River
Yeah.
Moon or something it
Yeah.
was called.
So,
So
but in a way, we're back there again, aren't we, Nandita?
that's,
Because,
isn't, like, when I see a 1950s film, somebody
yeah,
sent me a clip, in fact, recently. They were saying exactly the things that we are saying today.
yeah,
That, oh, zamana kharab hai. Pehle to log kitne achhe the. And, they were more honest. Now
right,
everybody's into money. And they were
right.
saying exactly all the things that we say today. So maybe we are constantly in a transition. So at some level, I think we all romanticize the past.
Yeah,
Cool things are happening at some level. Now we have, like, for instance, this pandemic and this migrant workers. It sometimes feels like the partition and the Bengal famine and everything
all
happening.
together, yeah,
What would have happened then? It's just that we can see those images now. That
right,
time we couldn't see those images. But is it any better, any worse? But yes, sometimes I do feel that there is a kind of a regression that is happening, especially in the case of women.
yeah,
We should have been in a much better place than we are today. That's for sure. When I speak to my son about these things, he doesn't understand it. He just looks at me like shocked, like, why should there even be a difference in the way people deal with men and women? And I don't know how to explain to him, because it's not even part of his world.
right,
And I talking to him, and I said, yeah, I mean, it's shocking that in today's time that we have to have this kind of an inequality. And he looked at me and said, what do you mean today's time? Even at that time. And I thought, that's true.
yeah,
Have I subconsciously felt that, oh, it was then, but now it can't happen, or it can't
yeah,
happen in the last 100 years? But why did it even happen then? So I'm
yeah,
hoping that this generation of boys and girls, when they become men and women,
yeah.
that they will change it for us in ways that, we are also still too conditioned, and we're constantly negotiating through our situation and not speaking up. Maybe, I don't know, I mean, it's a tough one. We are taking too long for us to be where women should be, or where anybody who's marginalized should be.
And also, I think being co-opted into a nationalistic discourse, which often slips into complete jingoism. That's the
Totally.
other problem,
Don't
isn't
even
it?
get me started on
No,
that.
I'm not going to get you started because I know that that will take us another hour. I would
No,
love
just
to.
to
I
just
would love to do that. But it is a
no, but
problem,
just because
isn't
you
it?
touched it.
Yes.
Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, but yes, please go ahead.
I was just saying that just because you've touched it, I think, which is, we are always called anti-national people
Yeah,
like us.
exactly.
Just want to put it out there that we all have multiple identity.
Yes.
My identity of being an Indian is one of my many identities. I have much to be proud of and much to be ashamed of. Because like any country has good things and has bad things.
Yeah.
And when cinema sheds light on something that's not good, or in a conversation we say something that's not good, it's because we love our country also deeply that we
Yeah.
want to make sure that this comes out and we fix it and we do
Right.
something about it.
Right.
So please don't make things so binary
Yeah.
and so simplistic that everybody who praises is, saying that the country is great. By praising a country doesn't become great. By caring about its country people and caring about its environment and caring about its children and women and its especially abled and everybody that we will become. So yeah, definitely there's no room for jingoism when the whole world is coming together through this crisis. I hope we are going to learn the lessons that we need to learn.
This is a general question from Eldors AY, but I would like to make it a little specific to you. The question is how is this pandemic going to redefine art? I wanted to ask you, how has it redefined or reinvented your world and your way of looking at things? Has it changed anything?
Well, listen to her is a perfect example of how one
Yeah,
has used that time.
right.
But I think, we would still want to tell stories. I would want to tell the same, not the same as in, I would want to still tell stories that, resonate with me, where it expresses my own dilemma. It's a privilege in some sense to be able to do that. I think art will also redefine itself because there will be a lot of digital things, but art
Yeah.
is also tactile.
Yes.
Art is also to do with the senses.
Yeah.
So I think how we consume art or how we look at art will always remain the same. I mean,
Yeah.
today, if a Kabir Doha or a Michelangelo work or like all the great works, or Manto or whoever, the great works have survived only because they've stood the test of time.
Right.
So it's not that one, there have been Spanish flus and there have been Bengal famine and we had a
And world
partition.
wars. Yeah.
Yeah, so things will happen. The point is, will we come out of it caring more about nature? Are we going to understand that this climate change is a reality? Are
Yeah.
we going to care about the people who are invisible, who have had to walk miles to just go back to their homes while we sit at our home and worry about how can we bring variety to our menu?
Yeah.
Are we going to be basically, this is a time I think to redefine yourself.
Yeah.
Are we going to, like Kiran said, are we going to reflect? Are we reflecting more? Are we reflecting on our choices? How are we going to consume? Are we going to be less consumeristic?
Yeah.
You know, is my art going to be more relevant to the world I live in? Those are the questions we'll ask because 2 years later, we will slowly forget.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we don't have great memory. It's
Right.
like when somebody dies that and you say, oh my God, life is so fragile. We must lead every day as if that's our last day. And we have all these great quotes, but we don't live by that.
Right.
So I think this pandemic is giving us privileged people enough time to ponder, and we shouldn't be wasting all of that in navel gazing. Instead, be also thinking, how
Yeah.
am I going to redefine myself so that when I engage back into the world, or even now,
Yeah.
it is worth something. If nothing for your own self, I think we should be
Exactly.
doing.
There's a related question from Rajshekhar C. I'm sure this pandemic and the migrant crisis would be a story for a filmmaker. It'll definitely make
Wonderful.
the world know more that about this problem, but nobody had the time to think about this, and the pandemic has brought it out. Uh, your response to that?
Well, I'm sure that already films must be registered for this.
Yeah.
I'm sure already films are, happening. It's a very tricky thing. When a big incident happens, a lot of people make films on that.
Yeah.
You can either make it genuinely to bring out the real story behind it, or the trauma behind it, or anything that you want to say through it,
Right.
or you can milk it.
Right.
And I think it's all about that intention. And even though it's this flat screen and which is not even interactive like theater, I think audiences as viewers, we can see through what the intent is.
Yes.
And this is also to all the filmmaker friends that I'm sure we will now make films that truly touch us and
Yeah.
touch genuine lives, and we will not milk this pandemic
Yeah.
in a way that leaves us more empty or just becomes a nice sensational story, but actually authentic stories. And so I'm sure there will be films about it, but this crisis has brought in many other things like domestic violence
Yeah. Exactly.
that already existed. It's accentuated it. It's
Yeah.
not nothing directly to do with the virus as such.
Yeah.
It's like if the migrant worker is stuck between the virus and starvation, the woman is stuck between the virus and abuse.
Yeah.
So there are many stories, and I think those stories will exist even beyond this pandemic. So yeah.
There's a question from Shangon Dasgupta. Are you going to dub the short film that you've made into regional languages? I sincerely
I'd
hope
love to.
so. Yeah.
No,
So,
that's why I said it is open source. It's not copyrighted. If somebody comes and helps me with it, I mean, there's only that much one can do. But if somebody comes and if somebody wants to sponsor it, somebody wants to take on the responsibility of it, I will be there to help them, take it through. I speak about 5 languages, but
oh,
there are,
yes, you do.
but yeah, a little bit. I mean, my father is Odia, my mother is Gujarati.
Yeah,
I'm supposed to be a Bengali because everyone thinks I'm a Bengali. So by default,
exactly.
I've learned a lot of Bengali through my friends and in the English. And I know smatterings of other languages. So if you're watching it and you want to, do it in Tamil or do it in Marathi or do it in Kannada, Kannada gottilla, but I can try. And
Great.
we can all, yeah, we should. I think there should be more and more people. We should, instead of thinking who's going to do,
Yeah,
if
just
anybody
do
out
it.
there
Yeah.
can, yeah, just let's do it.
There's a question from Sonakshi Chaturvedi. Nandita ma'am, is there any initiative or part of your organization? Nandita is her own organization, where there's some opportunity for college students aspiring to get into filmmaking.
Yeah, I mean, even for years, that has been a huge problem because I've always supported many organizations and many
Yeah.
different causes. And people have always asked me, is there an NGO that we can contribute to?
There
Whether
is
in money
Nandita
or
Das Incorporated. Please
no.
contribute to
I'm
her.
like, there are enough people out there who are doing amazing work.
Yeah.
I'm just a catalyst. I'm a little bit of a mouth speaker and, just telling about those organizations. I can put you in touch with them, but I don't have an organization of my own. I'm always looking for good interns who can, write well, who can imagine well, who have a passion for good stories, and beyond all, who think that art can be a powerful means for change. Yeah, but I unfortunately don't have anything of my
There's a
own.
question from Anita Patil Deshmukh. This is what we were talking about a little earlier, Nandita. Rural people and poor people who had a dignified place in the films up to the 70s have now disappeared from the imagination of Bollywood. Your comments?
Well, I mean, talking of dignity,
Hmm.
these migrant workers, they weren't beggars. They were
Yeah,
workers who
exactly.
earned and lived, who
Yeah,
sent back money, who lived in poor conditions so that
yeah,
they could take care of their parents and their wife or their husband or their children or whatever it was. And we have robbed even people from their dignity. We are making them stand in lines and, doling out food because that's the only thing that can be given to ease the pressure. So what about dignity in films?
yeah,
I mean, first we have to have dignity in society, as you said,
yeah,
that cinema imitates life, and this dignity is being robbed from their lives. So yeah, there are less, even in newspapers. I
yeah.
mean, you come from a journalistic background in Kaveree, and you know that how rural pages have decreased, right?
Absolutely. There's no
Unless
such thing
something
as agriculture. Yeah. No
unless
such.
something is truly sensational, it's not going to be covered. If it's sensational, then it can be from anywhere. And if some video leaks, because nowadays everyone has sort of become a journalist,
Yeah.
is can send something, then we'll hear it. But there are no real slice of life. How are people living? What are their real issues? We don't know anything about it. What are they going to do in the next 6 months? It's not only about making sure they reach there. Once they reach their villages, once the monsoon comes in, there is cyclone happening in the east, there is
Yeah.
locust happening in the west,
Yeah.
I mean, what a world we have created.
for
And what
ourselves.
are they going to do in those villages? And then when everybody in the cities, when they will be, we are all out of it and we will want all this help back.
Yeah,
And, they might, if they turn around and say, listen, we are not coming back, I think that's the only way we'll learn a lesson. But
I
we
hope
haven't even
so.
thought through that what
Yeah,
are they going to do in their rural areas. We never developed our rural
yeah,
areas enough so that they wouldn't have to
exactly.
come to the city.
Right.
And what kind of a life is that when you are away from your family for most part of the
Yeah,
year? So many house helps, they go to their villages for 1 month
yeah,
max. And
yeah,
that also we get all, hyper, like, oh, my driver's gone off for a month,
yeah.
he's taking 2 days more, or
Right.
is it just going, if nothing else, is it going to make us more compassionate
Yeah.
towards the people around us, if nothing else? So I think, yeah, it's a huge issue.
Couple of last questions, Nandita. Lots of questions for you, but I really want to take them because I think they've
Sorry if I'm
written.
not sounding so optimistic, but
No,
basically I'm a very optimistic person. Otherwise, I wouldn't work. So
we
while all this is daunting, let's do what we can. Let's not
absolutely.
get overwhelmed by
Yeah,
that. Even if
yeah,
you have, and all of us have an area of influence. We should
yes,
never think that if I think, oh, but Shah Rukh Khan has much more area of influence, what's the point of me talking about it? Then I'll do nothing. So we
exactly.
all have an area of influence. And if we believe in something, let's make sure that at least our immediate surrounding and the world, that our own little world is impacted by that.
There's a question from Vijay Lakshmi Nagraj. Don't you think a lot of this is ingrained in how the boys are brought up to believe that they're superior to the girl? Have we really evolved to understand this to bring about a positive change?
No, it's true. I mean, how we raise our sons is hugely problematic. I mean, I
Yeah,
remember when I was pregnant, I thought I was going to get a daughter. Like how we are burdened by this
yeah,
whole drop sex ratio and this whole mentality. We want to write it. And I was like, okay, if I have a daughter, I'm going to make her feisty and give her all the freedom and all of that. And lo and behold, I had a son.
yeah,
And then I was like, okay, what am I going to do with him? I don't even know, what are you supposed to do? And slowly I realized it's a bigger responsibility. How
yeah,
do you make, yeah, our sons, sensitive and caring and shouldering all the responsibilities and not coming from a place of entitlement? And but I think this generation, at least what I'm seeing, is maybe hopefully is going to be different,
yeah,
because they actually don't see that difference.
yeah,
Something that we kind of still grew up with, they
yeah,
don't see that difference in the same way.
exactly,
I could be
exactly.
talking about a very isolated or a
But
smaller
but
sample.
even that is good, At least there's
This
some
category of children are going to be decision makers in some form or
exactly.
the other.
Yeah,
But we definitely, the preferences to sons and sort of shunning the girls, not giving them proper education. Look at our dropout rates for girls, it's
yeah,
enormous.
yeah,
Right? So if girls are not allowed to go to schools, they're not given the same nutrition, they don't have opportunities to work, there is this natural exclusion that we do on gender, we do on caste, we do at so many levels, that I just think that we privileged people can do more. I mean, I'm asking myself that question, that do I really do enough? Can I push myself more? And of course, I go through guilt pangs, because I feel like if I push myself more, am I not responsible for this child who's now coming on the wave board? I am. But the
yeah.
point is that I don't know, how do we balance it? And why do we women always have to balance it? It's just
That's
tiring,
that is.
tiring. But we have to find a solution to this. Snehan, can you switch on the light, please? These lights.
There's a question from Vishwapriya Iyer. Please let us know what your experience as an actor was early on in your career, especially as you were wading through colorism in the industry.
Okay, we have not these
Ah, that's much nicer.
ones.
Good. He
I
can
just
be your
realized that
lighting coordinator and your
this sun was decreasing and this sun suddenly rose.
purpose.
I said, okay, switch on some lights. Early, my God, I'm not in that headspace, to be honest, to be talking about it, but I can just tell you that I've done about 40 films in 10 different languages, and you would struggle to name even five, because many of them are in languages that you wouldn't have heard. But each of them are precious to me,
Yeah.
because I don't think I would have been able to go to those parts of the country, meet those people,
And the
and
world, yeah.
that those different worlds, the stories, I think that has also informed me and my choices, because
Yeah.
slowly those characters, those stories, those people, they also give you so much. I
Right.
mean, my Mrinal Sen's film, which was in Taki,
Yeah.
it's a district in 24 Parganas in Bengal, or in Idiki in Kerala, or in Vidarbha in Maharashtra. I would have never gone to these
Yeah.
places and never known all of that. So not all films are the one turned out to be the way I'd imagined them to be, because an actor is not as great as it is perceived to be.
Right.
They don't have that much in control. It is
Right.
film is really a director's, a filmmaker's medium, and actors are perceived to be larger than they really are.
Right.
So you're kind of a cog in the wheel, an important cog, but
Yeah.
still. So some of the films didn't turn out the way I'd imagined. Yet now, when I look back, those experiences were really precious. To be a Banjara woman in a Telugu film, and to
Yeah.
be with all those Banjara community, and to
How
understand
amazing.
how they swapped children. And I mean, that story was bizarre. A film called Kamli that I
Yeah.
did, or
Exactly.
a film called Deviri in Kannada, which is about a woman in a slum and how she does sex work to fund education of her brother, but she doesn't want him to know, and when he knows, she's devastated.
Right.
And her dignity, and all these little stories that that I've been part of, I think they have enriched me, so I have
Yeah.
no complaints.
And I think the very last question, otherwise we'll run out of time. There's
And otherwise,
Jaya.
my son is glaring at me as he says this is an ominous glare. That means I have to stop.
There's Jaya Radhakrishnan, a big fan from Singapore. I'm a female writer here in Singapore, and you're a big inspiration. A humble request: would you consider collaborating in putting out a piece of work that addresses migrant female workers in Singapore working away from their homes in India?
I wish I had the capacity. I wish I was super rich. I had 20 hands. I had, a
20
huge team
brains.
that just, yeah, because so many people, every time I go to even a conference or a summit or anything, people come up to me and say, can you make a film about this? And, there are so many issues. So you have to find someone in Singapore. I'm sure there are filmmakers, and I'm sure they will tell these stories. And yeah, we all have to tell our stories, and there'll be many. I'm just a drop in the ocean.
Nandita, thank you so much. And I look forward to the next story that you tell. And we want it quicker than 8 years. Okay?
It will, it will. Thank you. Thank you, all of you. Thank you,
Thank you so
Kiran.
much.
Thank you,
Nandita,
Ravi.
that was
Thank
lovely.
you.
Thank you, Kaveri. That was brilliant.
Thank you so
And
Thank
much.
you, Kaveri, for always, agreeing to sort of
she
have
got
these
you to say a
conversations
lot.
with me.
Thank you.
But it
Thank
Thank
was
you.
you.
lovely, Nandita. Thanks for sharing all these things with us.
Oh, thank you. It gives me also, these are also reminders and reaffirmations. So every time you talk, you're not just talking to people, you're also talking to yourself. And
Exactly.
I think we all need these reminders. So thank you for giving me that opportunity.
Thank you so much, Nandita. Thank you so much, Kaveri. Thank you so much for joining us, Kiran, and all our audiences. Do go to our websites, Bangalore International Centre and Museum of Art and Photography, to get updates for events from us. Uh, Thank you so much, and good evening.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.